Hello. Am I audible? Sorry, I lost connection, I think. So, I don't know. Yeah, okay. So, Venerable Legtsok is joining us from South India, Sera Jey Monastic University. So, I would like to hand the thing over to Venerable Legtsok. Welcome, Venerable Legtsok, and it's all yours. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Pamela. Hello, everyone. Hello, Kunben. And Felipe is in the background there somewhere, I think. So, Felipe, I need to upload a document to the chat here and also to the Google Drive.
I saw that. You can upload to the chat.
Anyway, I just sent you a message in the chat box.
Yeah, I just
okay. So let's generate positive motivation first before we start the session. Just take a few moments. Okay, I'll do it in just a minute. First, motivation. Okay. Okay, so yeah, check your mind. Are you angry or jealous or depressed? Anyway, check the state of your mind. Think, why are you engaging in this review session?
Venerable, you're muted.
Thank you, Felipe. So yeah, I swear I unmuted at some point. Anyway, so yeah, try to generate a motivation that's not restricted to oneself alone, but in order to benefit all sentient beings. Yeah, we engage in this session, and then not restricted to just the well-being and happiness of this life, but in order to achieve the happiness of liberation from samsara and the full enlightenment. Instead of full enlightenment, then we engage in on this review session about His Holiness presentation, His Holiness teachings on commentary on the awakening mind by Nagarjuna. And also we can think by doing this kind of review session, we create a powerful cause to meet the Lama again, right? And to receive more teachings from the Guru in the future by, in effect, making offering a practice and trying to remember something of the Guru's advice. And thereby try to familiarize our mind with it, transform our mind according to the Guru's advice, and is the best offering practice. So we can think, in order to benefit all sentient beings, in order to cause the Buddha Dharma to flourish, in order to create causes for the Guru, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and our other Gurus' lives to be long and stable, and in order to meet our Gurus again and again and again in this life and future lives, and continually receive instruction. So therefore, we'll review some of His Holiness teachings from this morning. So, yeah, welcome everyone again. And I hope you were all able to tune in for His Holiness talk this morning. If you weren't, you can always watch it on, there's a recording of it on YouTube or Vimeo or wherever it's available. Yeah, so there's quite a lot to review, so let me not waste time just humming and hawing. Again, it's kind of four main kind of outlines for His Holiness talk. Well, first of all, His Holiness gave a general advice, as he usually does, for about 40 minutes. And then His Holiness just briefly read through the first 25 verses of this text, commentary on the awakening mind, which is, yeah, I hope you all have downloaded copies of already. It's just 100 verses long. So in 3 days, His Holiness has some time to give some explanation of it. So then His Holiness spent, yeah, just maybe 15 minutes going through the actual verses. And then the Russians and the Mongolian audience had some very good questions, about 5 questions. So His Holiness spent quite some time addressing their questions. So those are the three main topics: the introductory talk, explanation of the actual text, and then responding to questions. So in the actual His Holiness introductory talk, there's about 3 main outline headings. First of all, His Holiness spoke about the history of the relationship between Tibetans and Mongolians, especially in terms of the Dharma, their Dharma kind of friendship relationship over many generations. And then His Holiness kind of talked about the importance of the dialogue between, well, no, that's third. The different Buddhist traditions, the early tradition. His Holiness kind of used a new term in Tibetan. I'm not sure how it was translated in English, but basically like the early dissemination of Buddhism was kind of the Pali tradition, the same. And then the later dissemination of Buddhism as the Nalanda tradition and the Sanskrit tradition, and a little bit about the difference between those and the importance of using logic and reasoning to underpin our faith or to support our faith. And then His Holiness talked a lot about in relation to the importance of dialogue with science. And then His Holiness talked a bit about Nagarjuna in the Middle Way Review, and then he actually started explaining the text. So just to briefly review that introductory talk, so His Holiness opened up by saying, Tibetans and Mongolians have had a long Dharma relationship, and there's many Mongolians in the past who've come to Tibet to study. So before 1959, there was a famous Khenso Lekten. His Holiness named several, famous Mongolian scholars that both Tibetans and many of the Mongolian monks would be familiar with. So Khenso Lekten is one of them, and then again something Nima. I didn't get all the names. One of them spoke Russian. Then His Holiness mentioned when he sat for his debate. His Holiness said when he went for debate rounds, when he was taking the Laramba Geshe degree. So I think His Holiness was about 25 about then. Anyway, so then he was saying there were many, several Mongolian Geshes who debated him, and they debate very well. They're very, study very well, very learned. And then some of His Holiness debate tutors. They also were, there were a couple of Mongolians, His Holiness named them. And then how, His Holiness told this nice story, a very kind of moving story, about how then when the communist Russia, when they conquered Mongolia and the Mongolian regions of Russia, and they imprisoned, tortured, imprisoned many Mongolian monks, and then how there was one Lama who apparently was a teacher of one famous Amdo Lama, Kunkin Jaya, I think it was Kunkin Jaya Shepa. Anyway, so when the communists were they were going to, because this Lama, this Mongolian Lama had many students, and the communists were going to execute him. But just before they executed him, he said, may I have a moment to make a prayer? And then he offered this verse of praise, or he recited this verse of praise from Lama Chopa. So now I'll share my screen with you. I can find the document. This which explains the practice of Tonglen, right? It's in the Lamrim prayer at the end of Lama Chopa. It says, and thus perfect, pure, compassionate Guru, I seek your blessings that all transmigratory beings may without exception light put upon me right now, and that by giving my happiness and virtue to others, all transmigratory beings may experience happiness. So this Tibetan Lama recited this prayer and then said, okay, now you can shoot me. So yeah, His Holiness was just giving that as an example of what great practitioners there are among the Mongolian Geshes, Lamas of the past. And then His Holiness went into saying how, as all sentient beings are the same in having feelings. So His Holiness made a kind of a distinction here, which is not doesn't so emphasize so often that, usually we think of sentient being as any being who has a mind. But here His Holiness emphasized not so much that, any sentient being is a being who has a mind, but any sentient being is a being who has feelings, right? They experience, they have feelings of happiness and sadness. They have feelings of desire and kind of aversion, right? And thereby they desire happiness and they desire to be free from suffering. And then within sentient beings, humans are unique, compared to animals. For example, humans have much more intelligence. So humans have the intelligence to be able to be consciously aware of this and then to make decisions, about how they use their life based on this awareness that all sentient beings are the same in wanting happiness and wanting to be free from suffering. And then His Holiness was saying, kind of seeing this truth about, all sentient beings, no matter whether we tend to like them or dislike them, whether they're, same race or same religion or same gender as us, or whether different race, different religion, different gender, from a different nation or whatever, because we have human intelligence, we can recognize that, all other sentient beings are the same as us and wanting happiness and wanting to be free from suffering. And so seeing this truth, then we can transform ourselves so that we're more compassionate and more forgiving, more tolerant of others. And we put effort into not harming and rather benefiting other sentient beings. And then through practicing in this way, then Dharma spreads and a kind of universal compassion, basic human morality spreads throughout society in this way, right? So our minds change by seeing the truth, this fundamental truth of our human nature, our nature as sentient beings. And this is irregardless of religion or religious beliefs. So then His Holiness emphasized how, especially in Buddhism, we transform ourselves. We reduce our afflictive emotions and reduce the suffering of ourselves and others based on logic, seeing, our human nature, our nature as sentient beings, and that that we don't want happiness. We don't want suffering. We want happiness, and we have the potential to eliminate the causes of suffering, right? Because suffering arises based on specific causes, whose root is a distorted, way of perceiving, ignorance, basically, and happiness is based on logic and reason, seeing how, all sentient beings want to be happy. So therefore, if I practice not harming and benefiting others, they'll do the same to me, and then we have a peaceful, harmonious society. So based on that kind of reasoning, then we practice morality, and thereby create more causes for happiness. Whereas in other religious traditions, they more appeal to God. They know that all sentient beings are the creator of one God. Thereby, we're all children of the same God, or something like that. Or God loves all sentient beings, therefore I should love them too. So there's more appeal to faith rather than reason, and especially the understanding of cause and effect. And then His Holiness went into Buddhism, more specifically, how there's the kind of, I didn't quite get the phrase in Tibetan, but it's something like the early dissemination and the later dissemination, which refers to the Pali tradition and the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism. So His Holiness was saying, how, as he often does, how the Pali tradition is more based on faith, taking at face value all of the words of the Buddha without discriminating between those that are interpretive and those that are definitive. Versus in the Nalanda tradition and the Sanskrit tradition, where the understanding of Buddhist teachings is more based on reason. And when they see discrepancies or inconsistencies in what the Buddha taught, apparent contradictions, then based on logic and reason, they're able to interpret some teachings or posit some teachings as interpretive, and meaning, not being ultimately true, or not expressing the final truth that Buddha taught, and interpret or posit other teachings as definitive, which is the teaching ultimate truth. So this especially, I think it was the last teaching His Holiness gave, where Lama Tsongkhapa wrote a text about this, but it's especially the case when we're talking about the view of the ultimate truth. What is the final nature of all phenomena? In the first turning of the wheel, the Buddha taught that all phenomena have inherent existence, right? That all phenomena exist from their own side by the force of their own characteristics. Whereas in the second turning of the wheel, which is the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the Buddha taught that no phenomena at all have inherent existence, that nothing exists from its own side. So, there's that kind of big contradiction. So with reason and logic, we can understand that, in the first turning of the wheel, the Buddha taught that all phenomena have an inherent existence, because the audience for that teaching were people whose minds could not, it wouldn't fit in their minds. They wouldn't be able to bear to hear that nothing inherently exists. For that group of people, that audience of the Pali Canon sutras, then if the Buddha were to have taught that nothing inherently exists to those people, they would have fallen into the extreme of nihilism, that therefore nothing exists. The law of karma doesn't exist. There actually is no liberation. And then they would have, abandoned the whole Buddhist path, right? That's why in the first turning of the wheel, the Buddha taught everything has inherent existence, and then within that, you have to try to abandon the 10 non-virtuous actions and practice the Eightfold Noble Path and meditate on the Four Noble Truths and so forth. Okay, and then so His Holiness, so I'll share my screen again. He quoted this verse, which His Holiness often quotes. This one. I'll blow this up a little bit. O bhikkhus and wise men, just as a goldsmith would test his gold by burning, cutting, and rubbing it, so you should examine my words and accept them, not merely out of reverence for me. Yeah, I think we've gone through that before, so no need to talk about it now. And then, so then His Holiness went back a little bit to the history of India and Tibet, saying how, the Nalanda tradition first came to, how the Tibetans and Mongolians, they're common in that they follow this Nalanda tradition of Buddhism. So why is that? Because the first Buddhist scholars to bring Buddhism from India to Tibet were part of the Nalanda tradition, beginning with Shantarakshita, who was a great scholar of logic and a great scholar of the Middle Way. He composed the text on logic, I don't remember the name, but a text on the Middle Way called the Ornament of the Middle Way, I believe. And then, so this Nalanda tradition of Buddhism spread in Tibet first, and then His Holiness mentioned one earlier Tibetan who maybe went and taught in Mongolia, but the main one was the third Dalai Lama, Sonam Gyatso. He actually went to Mongolia towards the end of his life and then spent several years and passed away in Mongolia, I believe. And that's when he was the teacher of Altan Khan, who's the great grandson of Genghis Khan, I believe. And that's when Mongolia really converted into Buddhism in a large way. Buddhism became widespread in Mongolia. And then the Mongolians gave this name, Dalai, of Dalai Lama. Dalai is a Mongolian word. It means ocean. That's why many of them, His Holiness mentioned many of the names of the Dalai Lamas contain the name Gyatso. So Gyatso, it means ocean in Tibetan. So like the current Dalai Lama's name is Tenzin Gyatso. He didn't mention his own name, but the third Dalai Lama was Sonam Gyatso. And then, I should know more, but I don't really remember. Khalsan Gyatso is the seventh Dalai Lama. Nawang Losang Gyatso, I think the great fifth Dalai Lama, I think his name is Nawang Losang Gyatso. Anyway, many of the Dalai Lamas, the tradition always have Gyatso in their name. Except, the first one doesn't, right? The first two don't, because the first two, they were famous before the Mongolians gave this name, ocean-like Lama, Gyatso. So the first Dalai Lama's name is Gyawagendin Drup, right? There's no Gyatso on his name. But from the third Dalai Lama on, they all have Gyatso in their name. So that's a kind of, what do you say? It's like, a quality that was a characteristic from this relationship between the Dalai Lama and Mongolians. And then His Holiness told another story about how I'm not sure the year, maybe if one of you remember, you can mention later, but I think it was 1960, I thought he said, but that doesn't make sense. So anyway, His Holiness, after sometime, I'm not sure when, but sometime after the communists took over Mongolia and sort of destroyed Buddhism in Mongolia, His Holiness went to Ganden Monastery in Mongolia, and a group that he said there was quite a few old Mongolian monks there. They offered a long life puja for His Holiness, and as they recited the words of the puja, they chanted the prayers of the puja, then they were crying. They were, tears were streaming from their eyes because they were so sad about all the destruction that had happened. His Holiness said he himself also felt very, very sad at all the destruction that happened. And he also cried. But His Holiness was saying it just goes to show that, although, an oppressive power, they can destroy the buildings and the physical environment and even make many of the monks disrobe and make people give up the outward signs of faith. But if people have really strong faith in their minds, that cannot be changed, even by communist government or an oppressive kind of force. So then His Holiness from there led into the importance of having very strong faith in our beliefs based on reason and logic. And then His Holiness, I think he recounted, my internet connection this morning was a little bit in and out. And I didn't get to listen to the whole talk again today while I was preparing for the review. But I think His Holiness then mentioned how he often does that in one of his early interactions with Westerners, one Western scholar or something told him, be careful of science. Don't engage in dialogue or interaction with scientists because they'll destroy your faith and your religion. They'll make you give up your religion. And His Holiness replied that, no, that for me, that's not the case because my religious beliefs, my faith is based on logic and valid reasoning. So actually, the more I interact and have dialogue with scientists, because what I believe is based on reason, then I can convince them and to accept my own beliefs, right? So it's quite confident. And I think, his the Mind Life conferences and the work of the Mind Life conference and His Holiness dialogue with science bears him out on that, right? So what's next? So His Holiness then went on to say how these days many Western scientists, they're interested in studying more and more about Buddhist explanations about the mind, Buddhist practice of meditation. But whereas they're not so much interested in other religious traditions that are based more on just kind of faith that's not underpinned with logic and reason. Then His Holiness was saying how, also the view of dependent arising that's described by Buddhism has been very influential in the world of science, and Buddhist explanation of the mind and psychology. Many scientists they like very much. So therefore, His Holiness suggested that Geshes in South India at the great seats of learning of the Gelug tradition in South India, that they also study science, so that in the future they can have more dialogue, interaction with scientists, and that is actually happening. For example, there's a big study centers co-sponsored by Emory University at Dripping Woseling, His Holiness mentioned. So he's saying, although the communists tried to destroy Buddhist culture in Tibet and Mongolia, that they cannot easily do that because it's so much based on the Nalanda tradition and logic and reason. And then His Holiness emphasized the importance of study. Therefore, it's not just enough to say we're following the Nalanda tradition, and then have the Kongyur and Tengyur, all these volumes of books up on the shelf, and just make prayers to them, make offerings to them. We need to actually take the books down and read them and study, in depth and in a very extensive way, what the Buddha taught in the sutras, and then the Indian commentaries on those, and later Tibetan commentaries on those. And then, as an example, His Holiness was saying about how in the Parchen, the Perfections, so there's 5 main great treatises or 5 main topics that are studied in the universities. Great. I'll just upload real quick this document I'm sharing with you. So if you want, you can download it to your computer. So I just uploaded a link in the chat, although it's not going. Network disconnected. I don't know. Anyway, it's in the Google Drive. Well, no, I have to email it to. Anyway, I'll do it later. I have to email it to Felipe, I think. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, show you this other quotation. This is a really important quotation, which His Holiness does quote a lot. I'm not sure it's come up in any of the reviews before. Number 3 here. This is from the Ornament of Clear Realization by Maitreya Buddha. So it says, the achievings, the truths, the 3 jewels, Buddha, and so forth. So it's like typical lines from the Ornament of Clear Realization. They're really difficult to interpret. So the interpretation, I just put some of it here. The achievings, so here the achievings in the first line, the achievings refers to the 2 truths, right? Conventional truth and ultimate truth. The truths in the first line, that phrase, the truths, it refers to the 4 noble truths. And then the 3 jewels, so that's easy. The 3 jewels means the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the 3 jewels of refuge. So here His Holiness, so then His Holiness went on to explain here, which His Holiness often explains. This is a big point His Holiness makes again and again. So as followers of His Holiness, we should really try to think about it, remember it, and kind of study. And typically, usually when His Holiness explains this, he says, what distinguishes a Buddhist from a non-Buddhist? The main thing is, if you're Buddhist, you go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, right? If you're non-Buddhist, you don't, right? So going for refuge or not going for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha is what distinguishes a Buddhist from a non-Buddhist. So that's quite easy. But then His Holiness says, if you go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, you need to know how they, the main characteristic of refuge is that we have faith that the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, or we have confidence that the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha can protect us from suffering, right? That they can protect us from the suffering of this life, the suffering of future lives, all of the suffering of samsara, and that they can, they can show us how to be free from all those different types of suffering. So in order to have real stable faith that the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha can protect us from suffering, we have to understand how they do that and what the Buddha is, what the Dharma is, what the Sangha is, right? So the main thing, just to give you a quick taste of it is, the Buddha's primary quality is that he unmistakenly, or she, it's not a gender specific kind of thing, but an enlightened being, whoever they may be, they unmistakenly teach the 4 noble truths, right? The truth of suffering, the truth of the causes of suffering, the truth of the possibility of cessation, and then the truth of the path, how to be free from all forms of suffering. So it's because a person, by directly realizing the 4 noble truths in their own experience and then teaching out of their experience in an unmistaken way the entirety of the 4 noble truths, therefore they're a Buddha and they're a qualified teacher. They're a valid refuge as a teacher, right? So that's why, So that's why the Buddha is a valid refuge. And then what does the Buddha teach? Mainly the 4 noble truths, right? So why are the 4 noble truths a valid teaching? Because they unmistakably show what are the causes of suffering and what are the causes of the ultimate happiness of liberation and enlightenment. And then, and then the Sangha. Why are the Sangha a valid refuge? Because they support, the actual Sangha are the Arya Sangha, which means beings who have generated a direct realization of emptiness, right? And so when you generate a direct realization of emptiness, also you directly realize all of the 4 noble truths, right? You achieve the truth of cessation. It means you've also achieved the truth of the path, and then you directly realize the truth of suffering and the cause of suffering. So the actual Sangha is the Arya Sangha, who directly realize the 4 noble truths, and thereby they can, they can unmistakenly assist ordinary sentient beings in practicing the Buddha's teachings, right? So the Buddha is like the teacher, or the doctor. The Buddha is like a doctor who unmistakenly diagnoses the sickness and unmistakenly gives a prescription to be free from the sickness, and then the Dharma is like the actual medicine which is taken, and the Sangha are like the nurses or the helpers which assist a person in following the advice of the doctor. So so in that way, the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha are a valid refuge. So understanding why the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha are a valid refuge depends upon correctly understanding, go back, the Four Noble Truths. So we're going in reverse order here, right? On correctly understanding the Four Noble Truths. And then because the Four Noble Truths, to correctly understand the Four Noble Truths, we have to understand essentially what is the most fundamental cause of suffering and how to be free from it. So to understand that, we have to understand the two truths, right? Conventional truth and ultimate truth. Because only by understanding ultimate truth, especially, do we understand that actually it's ignorance, which is part of conventional truth. Ignorance, a fundamental ignorance, grasping at inherent existence, that is the final root, the most fundamental root or cause, or root cause of all suffering. And it's understanding emptiness of inherent existence that is the ultimate kind of remedy, that, or the thing that eliminates all suffering and brings about happiness and well-being. So, so it's only by understanding the two truths correctly that we understand the Four Noble Truths. Only by understanding the Four Noble Truths that we accurately understand the three jewels of refuge, right? So in that way, we regenerate faith that's based on reason. Right? We can come back to that if you have more questions about it. And then His Holiness quoted from Entrance to the Middle Way, saying how it's similar to quantum mechanics. So here, number 4 in my little cheat sheet here. So this verse talks, no, sorry, 4b. So here in number 4, I just listed, because His Holiness just quickly quoted these four verses. Actually, it's 4.5 verses from Entrance to the Middle Way by Chandrakirti. So this, I think, probably every teaching that His Holiness has given in the last 4 months or 6 months, or since the pandemic began, he mentions these four, they're called these 4 absurd consequences. And His Holiness is saying again and again that so there's four verses. Each verse expresses one of these absurd consequences. And His Holiness has said many times that he recites each of these verses each morning as he's doing like Kora, as he's walking around early in the morning doing his exercise. And then he thinks about each of these 4 reasonings. So His Holiness quickly recited all 4 verses, but he mostly spoke about the second one. So I'll just read the second one here. So in this number 4, there are A, B, C, and D. Right, those are the 4. But in the last, I think it was the last month's teaching His Holiness gave, I gave and also on dalailama.com in the description, in the news section, you can find the description of many of the teachings. So I think it's in the second day of teachings that His Holiness gives. There's some explanation about these 4 verses. Anyway, so His Holiness read the second one mostly. Thus, when such phenomena are analyzed, so when any phenomenon is analyzed, nothing is found as their nature apart from suchness, right? So their ultimate nature is emptiness of inherent existence, nothing more than that. So the conventional truth of the everyday world should not be subjected to thorough analysis, right? So His Holiness is saying when you thoroughly analyze something to see if it inherently exists or not, to see if it exists from its own side or not, or to see if it has independent existence, you find nothing. There's nothing that inherently exists whatsoever, right? And that is the ultimate nature of all phenomena. The final, the ultimate nature of all phenomena is this emptiness of inherent existence. But then, so there's a question, well, how does the ordinary phenomena, how do they function? How can they exist and how can they interact with each other? How do they function? So they function in a way that does not withstand analysis, right? So he's saying in the everyday world of things that we interact with, those exist on a conventional level or on a, as merely imputed phenomena, they do exist. But if you investigate to see whether they have an inherent existence, you'll find they don't whatsoever. So that's why it's saying, so the conventional truth of the everyday world should not be subjected to thorough analysis of whether. So His Holiness was saying this is just like quantum mechanics. And that quantum mechanics, when you analyze, say, a physical phenomena, to see how it exists, you look at its parts, its smaller and smaller and smaller parts, and finally you find, at this most subtle level of atoms, the level of, protons, electrons, and so forth, that they don't have any objective existence at all. They're neither objectively a particle or a wave. depending on the act of observation, at sometimes in places they exist as particles, and sometimes in places they exist as waves. Even their location is not certain, and their velocity, other properties of them are not certain. Those properties only exist in relation to the act of observation. So at the macro scale of physical things, they don't bear that kind of analysis in a very, very similar way. Okay, so I'm spending too long on this probably. Okay, and then His Holiness is saying, so through analyzing how phenomena actually exist, the important thing is not to get caught up in this kind of just dry intellectualization, but to use analysis and understanding of emptiness of inherent existence to reduce our attachment and reduce our anger, right? To see how our afflictive emotions arise from the strong grasping at, a reified self of persons, a reified self of, other persons. So we grasp at an inherently existent person, I, and then we think I and mine. I want this, I don't want that. I like this, I don't like that. And we feel like that is very important because I really exist. So I really need what I want, and I really need to not have what I don't want happen. That becomes very important. So we have self-centered attitude. So we need to use this analysis to see, well, when I think I want this, I want that, who is that I? How does that I actually exist? What is its reality? I'm not, anyway, I think I'll share my screen. So His Holiness did quote, I think he quoted this other verse below. Oh no, that's not the one. Let me see. I think I got a little confused here. Here, I think this number 9. I think this is the verse His Holiness quoted here. Thus, illuminated by the rays of wisdom's light, the Bodhisattva sees as clearly as a gooseberry in his open palm, that the 3 realms and their entirety are unborn from the very start, and through the force of conventional truth, he journeys to cessation. So basically, this is saying a Bodhisattva sees that, so thus illuminated by the rays of wisdom's light. So by using intelligence to generate wisdom, understanding the ultimate nature of phenomena. So by analyzing how things exist again and again, then the Bodhisattva comes to see as clearly as like, a raspberry in your hand, any kind of berry, gooseberry in the open palm. So just as clearly as you can see, a berry in your hand. So what does a Bodhisattva see? That the 3 realms, so it means everything in the world, and their entirety are unborn from the very start. So that's a key phrase. Unborn from the very start means from the very beginning, beginningless time, nothing has ever inherently existed. Nothing exists from its own side. There are no objectively or intrinsically existent phenomena whatsoever. There never have been, there aren't now, there never will be in the future. So they see that truth, and yet through the force of conventional truth, so this means primarily referring to bodhicitta. Right? Bodhicitta, the aspiration to achieve full enlightenment, in order to benefit all sentient beings, is a conventional truth. So that's part of the method side of the path. So conjoining that wisdom, understanding emptiness, with the method side of the path, and especially great compassion and bodhicitta, then a bodhisattva journeys to cessation. Right. So the ultimate cessation is the state of enlightenment. And then, so therefore His Holiness taught, not His Holiness, therefore the Buddha taught the 4 Noble Truths in order to teach us how to journey to the state of, beyond the suffering of samsara and the state of full enlightenment by, conjoining the wisdom and method sides of the path. And then His Holiness emphasized, even someone who's not religious, if you explain to them clearly how suffering arises from causes, and those causes of suffering can be eliminated through logical analysis, then they can understand that even outside of a religious context, because it's just logical. And then he was saying to the Russian Mongolian audience, so you Mongolians, Russians can definitely benefit many beings in the world, both Buddhist and non-Buddhist, by engaging in study and practice, and then presenting the Buddhist teachings in a secular, in a logical way. And so then His Holiness went in to talk more about Nagarjuna, saying Nagarjuna primarily explained the view of emptiness in the 6 treatises on logic, of which the main one is the fundamental wisdom or root wisdom. And then how by reflecting on selflessness or emptiness, we can reduce self-cherishing or self-centered attitude and increase our concern and cherishing others. So here His Holiness quoted a bunch of verses. So I'll skip back to my little collection of verses here. Okay, so from number 5 here. Well, His Holiness mentioned this verse here and also below when he started explaining the text for today. Said, I am neither one with the aggregates nor different. So this is by Nagarjuna from Fundamental Wisdom. So His Holiness here is talking about how to meditate to reduce our grasping at an inherently existent self of persons. So His Holiness, actually the words of this prayer are a little different. I'll show you below. But His Holiness, because where it says I, all those I's are actually the Tathagata, or the one that's gone. But His Holiness was saying he finds it much more effective in his own practice to replace the word, the Tathagata, the Buddha, with I. Right? So, so we analyze. I'm neither one with the aggregates. So what are your aggregates? Are our body and mind. So first we think, first we have to identify the object of negation. So it means identify how we ordinarily appear to exist to ourselves. So we can especially look at a time when we've been falsely accused of doing something wrong by someone, or at a time we feel very arrogant and proud, or a time we feel angry. If we can recollect those kind of times, or actually when we're feeling that way, check to see how do we appear to exist, we'll see that it appears as if there is a real person kind of at the core of who we are that is not merely imputed by the mind, right? That really exists from its own side. So then we look for that kind of person that appears to exist from its own side. And then we find, we ask, is it one with the aggregates or different from the aggregates? Is it one with my body and mind? No, it's not my body, it's not my mind. Is it something separate from it, independent from my body and mind? So we find I am neither one with the aggregates, nor am I different from the aggregates. The aggregates are not dependent upon me, upon that kind of independent self, nor am I dependent on the aggregates. Meaning actually the conventional person that does exist is dependent on the aggregates, of course, it's labeled upon the aggregates. But the I, which is the object of refutation, the I, which is the basis for our generating arrogant pride, our generating defensiveness, our generating attachment and anger, that I, which appears to have inherent existence or exists from its own side, that one is not dependent upon the aggregates. It cannot be, right? It appears to not be dependent on the aggregates. So nor am I dependent on the aggregates. I do not possess the aggregates. So again, the conventional existent I does possess the aggregates. So we do have a body, we have a mind, we possess our body and mind. But here we're not talking about the conventionally existent. We're talking about the I, which is ordinarily appears, the one that appears to exist from its own side. So if it does exist in that way, if it has intrinsic existence or inherent existence, then it cannot have a relationship with anything else. It cannot be dependent upon anything else. Therefore, it cannot possess the aggregates. So then what else am I? What am I apart from the aggregates? You cannot find. And then His Holiness quoted this verse by Chandakirti. Seeing with their, so again, His Holiness didn't explain these verses. His Holiness, he kind of just throws these verses out very quickly. Mainly, he's assuming that the audience, in a way, traditionally, the main audience is monks and nuns who are studying these treatises all the time, right? Or geshes. But so that's why I'm sharing these verses with you all in these review sessions again and again, so that you can become familiar. And then in between teachings in your own time, you can kind of study about them, read, reflect upon them. And then when His Holiness throws them out, you just kind of, the meaning of it, hopefully will quickly arise to your mind. I mean, it takes some time, it takes some familiarization, but we have to start somewhere, right? So, and also I don't have time to go through these verses so much, if we're going to get through like the other things His Holiness taught. So, seeing with their wisdom that all afflictions and all faults stem from the identity view. So this is grasping at inherently existent self of persons. So all afflictions, all anger, attachment, jealousy, arrogance, and pride, and so forth, stem from the identity view, grasping at the perishable collection. So what is the perishable collection? It's not all the fruits and vegetables in your fridge. No, it is your body and mind, right? Why? Because they're momentarily disintegrating. Our body and mind are a collection of aggregates upon which we are labeled, and they're changing continually. Thereby, they're perishable. And eventually they die, we die. So, and we're separated from our body and mind. So seeing with their wisdom, so this is like yogis or bodhisattvas, that all afflictions and all the faults, so all suffering, stem from the identity view, grasping at the perishable collection, and knowing that the self is the focus of this identity view. The yogi engages in the negation of selfhood. So maybe I think I made a little bit of mistake in explanation now. So, so here it's more like this. So the perishable collection is the collection of our body and mind. So the identity view is basically ignorance grasping at true existence. So first, our ignorance grasping at true existence or inherent existence. We observe our body and mind, grasp at the body and mind as existing from your own side. Right, as having inherent existence. And then grasps at, there being a person who possesses the body and mind. So mainly, so the ignorance grasping at the inherently existent self of persons observes a person who possesses our body and mind, and then grasps at that person as inherently existent, right? Yeah, so basically like that. The ignorance grasping at the inherently existent self of persons observes a person who possesses the perishable aggregates and inherently grasps at that person as existing from their own side, and then it grasps at that person and grasps at the aggregates as being that which is inherently possessed by that person, right? So in Tibetan, we talk about na zimbe zimba and naiwa zimbe zimba, right? There's grasping at the I and grasping at mine, right? There's these two things, grasping at an inherently existent I and grasping at inherently existent mine, right? So you just talk to any toddler or play with any toddler in the sandbox for a while, and that they go, I want this, and then no, this is mine. So as adults, we're just the same. We have I, and then because we have I, we have mine. So the view observing the perishable. Anyway, I won't go into more detail. You can ask about it more if you want to know later during question time, which we have to get to very soon. So hold on, I'm still sharing my screen because His Holiness quoted a bunch of verses here. Then he quoted this verse, which he often quotes from Aryadeva. Just as the body sense power pervades the body, ignorance is present in all afflictive emotions. By overcoming ignorance, you will also overcome all afflictive emotions. When dependent, all afflictive emotions, all suffering comes from ignorance. So then, therefore, if you abandon ignorance, you abandon all the afflictive emotions. Just as if you cut out the roots of a tree, you kill the whole tree. When dependent arising is seen, ignorance will occur. So how do you abandon ignorance? You meditate on dependent arising. When dependent arising is seen, ignorance will not occur. Therefore, make effort in every way to realize just this teaching. So to realize just this teaching of dependent arising. Right. So the most important thing to do if you want to realize emptiness and be free from suffering is to meditate on the truth of dependent arising. Saying by doing that, by meditating on dependent arising emptiness, then eventually you're going to achieve this. Number 9. Thus, illuminated by the rays of wisdom's light, the Bodhisattva sees as clearly as a gooseberry in his open palm that the 3 realms in their entirety are unborn from their very start. And through the force of conventional truth, he journeys to cessation. So as well as we'll quoted that verse again there. Yeah, I think that was it for there. And then so then if we can reduce this grasping at inherent system I, we reduce this selfish and self-centered attitude. Thereby we reduce our harming others, and we increase our altruistic concern and caring about others. And His Holiness is saying that we can do this is supported by science, because even many scientists these days say human beings are social animals. For their very survival in their evolutionary development, they've developed such that they naturally rely upon others who are part of the same tribe, part of the same family, part of the same culture. So we have a natural capacity to care about others and to have concern for others. And if we can reinforce that with intentional training and intellectual understanding of the benefits, the need for and the benefits of caring about others, not harming others and benefiting others as much as we can, then we can easily generate loving kindness and compassion more and more within ourselves, and teach that to others, be a role model for that, and thereby create peace and happiness in our societies. And isn't it the case that we need to do that? Because look how many problems we have these days that are human-made, that are totally man-made problems, by people holding rigidly to their own views, by people not caring about others who are different from them, by people thinking that somehow they're justified in harming and treating that people think they're somehow justified in treating other people in ways that they themselves would not want to be treated, right? So by caring about others, then we learn to treat others in a way that we ourselves want to be treated. Thereby we bring about peace and happiness and harmony. So again, this reasoning and logic appeals to people in a secular way. It's not a religious thing. It's just a fundamental human truth. So then His Holiness explained the text. Actually, His Holiness already was explaining the text at this point. I missed that juncture. So let's quickly look through the text, shall we? You all have the text? Anyway, I'll share my screen with you so you can see this text. It's a wonderful text. I read it for a few days in preparation for this review. And yeah, it's really nice text. His Holiness explained there's how many sections? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Basically, there's about 5 main sections to this text, right? So first of all, it's just the introduction. And then the first main section is Nagarjuna's refuting the views, wrong views of non-Buddhists, right? So he's refuting the kind of self asserted by non-Buddhists. Then Nagarjuna is refuting the kind of self and some of the main assertions by that are held by within Buddhists by the hearer school, basically, or you could say the great exposition and the sutra school, right? And then so there's the introduction. Then the first main part is refuting the views of non-Buddhists. Second main part is refuting the views of the great exposition and hearer school, the kind of self that they posit. Then the third part is refuting the views of the mind-only school. Right? So first presents the views of self and the phenomena of the mind-only school, and then refutes those. And then the fourth, where are we? Yeah, then the fourth part is presenting the view of emptiness of Nagarjuna's own view, right? So in Lama Tsongkhapa's interpretation of that, that means that it's the middle way consequentialist view of emptiness, presents that. And then in the last section of the text, the fifth section, makes a really beautiful description about how to practice bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta, right? So when it says a commentary on the awakening mind, remember, which is bodhicitta, right? Remember, there's two bodhicittas. There's ultimate bodhicitta and conventional bodhicitta, right? So usually when we say bodhicitta, we're thinking about conventional bodhicitta, the aspiration to achieve enlightenment in order to free all sentient beings from suffering. But ultimate bodhicitta is actually the main topic of, 2/3 or 3/4 of the text is talking about ultimate bodhicitta. And then the last, so in those 5 headings I just mentioned, the first 4 are all related to ultimate bodhicitta. And then only the 5th, the last, is talking about conventional bodhicitta. So that's the title, Bodhicitta Vivarana, Janchup Sendra by Arya Nagarjuna. Then there's the traditional homage to Vajrasattva. So this is interesting. I mean, it shows this text is very much related to Tantra, actually. The fact that he praises Vajrasattva at the beginning. And then also this. So then there's this first, these lines that are quoted, and His Holiness explained, which I never heard. I probably heard before and forgot, but I didn't know. These are lines from the root Tantra of Guhya Samaja, right? So from the Guhya Samaja root Tantra, these lines. And they kind of are an outline for the whole text. So we can see this whole text as an explanation of these lines. Devoid of all substantive entities is talking about refuting the views of the non-Buddhists and the Great Exposition and Sutra school, utterly discarding all objects and subjects, such as the aggregates, elements, and sense fields, is talking about refuting the views of the mind-only school. And then due to the sameness of all phenomena, is talking about asserting the views of the consequentialist, the middle way consequentialist school. And then one's mind is primordially unborn. It is in the nature of emptiness. So this is talking about how we have the potential for full enlightenment. So it's kind of related to conventional bodhicitta and the aspiration to achieve full enlightenment, right? And then just as, so His Holiness just read through, just as the blessed Buddha and the great bodhisattvas have generated the mind of great awakening, I too shall from now until I arrive at the heart of awakening, generate the awakening mind in order that I may save those who are not saved, free them, transcend sorrow, those who have not thoroughly transcended sorrow. So you might recognize those lines, actually, these lines here, as being, they're part of the tantric vows. When you take the tantric vows, they contain those lines. Yeah. Those bodhisattvas who practice by means of the secret mantra, after having generated the awakening mind in terms of its conventional aspect in the form of the aspiration, must then produce the ultimate awakening mind through the force of meditative practice. I shall therefore explain its nature. Right, so he also, okay, so in the first verse, bowing to the glorious Vajra holder who embodies the awakening mind, I shall explain here the meditative practice of the awakening mind that destroys cyclic existence. The Buddhas maintain the awakening mind to be not obscured by such conceptions as consciousness of self, aggregates, and so on. It is always characterized by emptiness. It is with a mind moistened by compassion that you must cultivate awakening mind. So this is conventional awakening mind, bodhicitta, with effort. The Buddhas who embody great compassion constantly develop this awakening mind. Okay, so this word here, what's been translated as develop, is actually gom in Tibetan, which means meditate. So it's more like the Buddhas who embody great compassion constantly meditate on this awakening mind. So then from here is refuting the permanent self posited by the Tirthakas or non-Buddhists. Within all the aggregates of the body and mind, nowhere can you find a locus for this. So it means when you look for the kind of self, the permanent self, right? So the kind of self posited by non-Buddhists is a permanent self that is partless and does not arise independent upon causes and conditions, and it's something separate from the body and mind, right? Or it controls the body and mind, but it exists as something. It doesn't depend upon the body and mind, and it's permanent and partless. So when you thoroughly analyze it with reasoning, within all the aggregates of body and mind, nowhere can you find a locus for this. So you cannot find this kind of self. The aggregates exist, but are not permanent. They do not have the nature of selfhood. A permanent and an impermanent cannot exist as the support and the supported. So he's saying something that's permanent cannot exist independence upon something that is impermanent, right? So something that is permanent and like independent from the aggregates as the non-Buddhists describe, it cannot exist independence upon or in relation to the aggregates which are impermanent. If the so-called self does exist, so the kind of self asserted by this non-Buddhist, if the so-called self does not exist, how can the so-called agent be permanent? Yeah. If there were things, then one could investigate their attributes in the world. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, it doesn't come to mind how to interpret that verse now. Since a permanent cannot function to cause, so something that's permanent cannot be a cause of something else in gradual or instantaneous terms. So both without and within, no such permanent entity exists. Okay, so here, yeah, again and again throughout this text, Nagarjuna uses the word, or I mean, it's translated. Remember, this is translated from Sanskrit, right? But in Tibetan, they use the word ngopo. So ngopo, throughout the text, it's mostly used to, it refers actually to inherent existence or substantial existence, which here means is synonym with inherent existence or true existence or something existing from its own side. So no such permanent entity has inherent existence. It's kind of the way to read this. If it were potent, why would it be dependent? I don't have time to explain every verse, but if there's some verse you kind of really want to know the meaning of, then you can ask me about in the question and answer, we can come back to it. If it were potent, why would it be dependent? For it would bring forth everything at once. That which depends upon something else is neither eternal nor potent. Yeah, so something that depends upon other things is not eternal because it arises independent when those causes and conditions are present, and does not arise when they're not present. And it's not potent in the sense that it doesn't have the ability to produce itself, right? Anything that exists in dependence upon causes and conditions, it exists through the power of those causes and conditions. Therefore, is not what's called potent here. If it were an entity, it would not be permanent. For entities are always momentary. And with respect to impermanent entities, agency has not been negated. This world, devoid of self and so on, is utterly vanquished by the notions of aggregates, elements, and the sense fields, and that of object and subject. Yeah. So from here, Nagarjuna is doing what? He's positing, so first he posits the assertion of the Great Exposition and the Sutra Square. Thus, the Buddhas who seek to help others have taught the disciples the five aggregates: form, feeling, perception, volitional forces, and consciousness. And they've taught those to be inherently existent, right, in the first training of the Lord Dharma. The excellent among the bipeds is an epithet of the Buddha. The excellent among the bipeds means the Buddha always taught as well. Forms appear as a mass of foam. Feelings resemble bubbles in water, right? So forms appear, although they don't have any substantial existence. So forms appear as a mass of foam. Feelings resemble bubbles in the water, and perception is like a mirage. Mental formations Okay, hello everyone, back. So where was I when I got cut off?
Mental perceptions.
Okay, easy. Mental formations, really big formations.
So for
Mental
formations
are like a plant and tree, they have no essence. Consciousness is like a magical illusion. So this is really important lines, actually. These lines right here. because they're part of the Pali Canon. So they're part of one of the Pali Sutras. I don't remember which one right now, but they're taught in the first turning of the Wheel of Dharma. So it's based on this that Chandrakirti asserts that actually the Buddha did teach emptiness of inherent existence in the first turning of the Wheel of Dharma. On the basis of these lines, they're able to understand that all things are empty of inherent existence. So these lines are quoted in the auto commentary on Entering the Middle Way. Presenting the aggregates in this manner, the Buddhas taught thus to the bodhisattvas, right, who can realize emptiness. That which is characterized by the four great elements of earth, water, fire, and air, the four great elements, that which is composed of or characterized by the four great elements is clearly taught to be the aggregate of form. The rest are invariably established, therefore, as devoid of material form. Right? So in the world, there are physical things that are part of the physical aggregate, and then there are mental things and non-associated compositional factors, which are not material. Among these, the eyes, visible forms, and so forth, which are described as the elements, these should be known as the 12 sources and as the objects and the subject as well. Right, so the eyes and then the things that we see with our eyes are their sources, because it's independence upon those, objects that we see with our eyes and are having an eye sense power in the physical eye. When those come together, we produce eye sense consciousness, right? So, and then in dependence upon that, we can see there are objects which are perceived and then subjects which perceive objects. Neither atom of form exists, nor is sense organ elsewhere. That is a strange translation. Atom of form exists, nor is sense organ elsewhere. I'm not sure what it means. Even more, no sense organ as agent exists. So the producer and the produced are utterly unsuited for production. Yeah, I'm not sure what he's saying there. I think definitely if you just throw in inherent existence, that makes sense, but I'm not sure that's really what's done. Anyway, we leave it. Then, okay, so here from verse 17, 18 is Nagarjuna is refuting partless particles. So this is part of the mind-only school presentation that they refute partless particles. So partless particles are something. So partless particles is the idea that it's kind of like a scientific materialist, that the fundamental building blocks of all phenomena in the world, and especially material phenomena, are these smallest possible particles, which cannot be further subdivided, which cannot be divided into smaller parts. So there's a particle which is partless, right? It cannot be divided into smaller parts. So the mind-only school refutes that. The atoms of form do not produce sense perceptions, for they transcend the realm of the senses, right? So like when you look at your phone, your laptop, or the screen you're looking at now, it's made up of, particles, right? Atoms. The atoms are made up of smaller particles, right? Of electrons, protons, and neutrons, and those are made up of smaller particles. So, right, with our eyes, we see our laptop or our phone or whatever, and we know it's made up of particles, but we cannot see those individual particles. And we can't see the individual atoms of material things that we see, right? So the atoms of forms, so therefore those individual atoms do not produce sense perceptions, for they transcend the realm of the senses, right? We cannot see them. If asserted that they are produced through aggregation. So if we assert that all those atoms together, they produce our sense consciousness. Production through collection too is not accepted. So, a collection of things, if they have inherent existence, that collection of things also cannot produce something. Through division in terms of spatial dimensions, even the atom is seen as possessing parts, right? So even no matter how small an atom you posit, it also possesses parts, right? Because it has, His Holiness was explaining today, because in modern physics, all those very subtle particles, they're constantly moving, right? They're constantly in motion. Like you think about electrons, they're orbiting an atom, the nucleus of the atom. The nucleus of the atom itself is always in motion in relation to other atoms. And therefore, it always has a front side and a back side, right? If we're moving through space, there's a side which faces the direction in which we're moving, and there's a side, the back side, which is away from the direction in which we're moving. So even, based on that reasoning, as one kind of reasoning, you can see atoms also have parts. Usually it's described also atoms, if two atoms, they touch or they meet, there's a side that's touching and a side that's not touching, right? Therefore they also have parts. So through the division in terms of spatial dimensions, even the atom is seen as possessing parts. That which is analyzed in terms of parts, how can it logically be an indivisible atom, right? So there's no partless atoms or partless particles. So then, so presenting the mind-only school and refuting external objects existing objectively, right? So now presenting more of the mind-only school and then refuting the existence of external objects. With respect to a single external object, divergent perceptions can arise. A form that is beautiful to someone, for someone else, it is something else, means it is ugly or just neutral. With respect to the same female body, three different notions are entertained by the ascetic, right, who's the lustful, and a wild dog. So just guess, So as a corpse, an object of lust or food, right? So for the ascetic, who's trying to reduce attachment to the female form. So think about a male ascetic, a male monk or something, and they're trying to reduce their attachment to a female's body. They try to meditate on as a corpse, right? They think, eventually this person will die, then this body would seem so attractive now, will just be a corpse, and thereby reduce attachment. Then the person who's not doing that, they're just full of lust, for their lover or something. They see the object, the person's body as extremely attractive. And then for a wild dog, who's very hungry, they just see that body and want to eat it. To them, it's just food, right? So here, what he's doing is saying, the mind-only school, they say there are no external objects. The objects just exist independent on the mind. And their reason for doing that is because if, for example, an external object really did exist, it should be perceived in the same way by whoever sees it, right? So if they're, according to the mind-only school now, right, if there really are external objects, then they exist from their own side, and whoever perceived those objects should see them in the same way. But that's not the case, because an ascetic, a lustful person, and a wild dog, as an example, we see the same objects in very different ways. So then mind-only school uses that as a reasoning to say that actually there are no external objects whatsoever, but everything we see is just a projection of our own minds. So it's the sameness of objects that functions, right? It's the sameness of the object that functions, if asserted. So this is a kind of answer to the mind-only school. Is this not like being harmed in a dream? Between the dream and wakeful state, there is no difference insofar as the functioning of things is concerned. So the mind-only school is saying, even if, just because things exist as one nature with the mind of the observer, who experiences them, that doesn't mean they can't function. For example, when you see, things in a dream, you experience things in a dream, they still have effect and they still function in the dream state. When you wake up, of course, then they don't function. Something like that. In terms of objects and subjects, whatever appears to the consciousness, apart from the cognitions themselves, no external objects exist anywhere, right? So this is the mind-only school view, remember. This is not the consequentialist school view, don't get it mixed up. So there are no external objects at all existing in the modes of entities. So here again, entities, this term entities might refer to inherent existence. But there are no external objects at all existing in the modes of entities. The very perceptions of the individual consciousnesses arise as appearance of the forms. Just as a person whose mind is deluded sees magical illusions and mirages, and the cities of Gandharva spirits, so too forms and so on are perceived. To overcome grasping at selfhood, the Buddha taught aggregates, elements, and so on by abiding in the state of the mind only, right? The beings of the great fortune even renounced that teaching. So here, he's saying, in order to help, so in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught this sutra that is in which he taught the mind-only school view. So for the audience of that sutra, the beings who are the intended disciples of that sutra, intended to be benefited by that sutra, are those sutras that are part of the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. The Buddha taught that's where he taught everything's in the nature of the mind. So why? In order to help them overcome overcome grasping at selfhood. The Buddha taught that the aggregates, elements, and so on, so all of our aggregates, our body and mind, are abiding in the state of the mind only, are merely, the entity of the mind, or merely projections of the mind, you could say. But, and then then this last line refers to what he's about to teach, the middle way school. The beings of great fortune means beings who are suitable receptacles for teaching on the middle way view of emptiness, even renounce that teaching. So they renounce also the mind-only school view of things. So then what follows here is a refutation of the mind-only school. So this is where His Holiness stopped today, right? He went through the first 25 verses. So yeah, I better stop there and take your questions. So at this point, I mean, then the Mongolians, the audience, the Russian Mongolian audience, they asked questions. And there were some cool things that came up because they had some really good questions. But why don't we stop here? And if you guys have questions, I'll try to address those. I see a lot of very intelligent people's names on the boxes in my Zoom room. So I imagine there's some very good questions. Here. Dilshad, do you have a question? You always have some question. Yeah. Let's see. Well, how about we play a little game until you guys think of questions? I can ask you the questions that the Russian audience asked and see how you answer. Or do you remember what His Holiness answered? The first was, I didn't actually hear the whole first question because my internet connection cut out at that time. But it was something about the sevenfold cause and effect method for generating bodhicitta versus, I think, the method of exchanging self and others. So first of all, do any of you remember what the question was? The first question was?
Yeah, the person was asking if those two methods were not contradictory because of how they were structured, and wanted to know if there's any contradiction between doing one or the other.
I see. Well, what do you think, Felipe?
Well, His Holiness said they're not.
Yeah, of course they're not. I mean,
It was interesting because
bodhicitta.
His Holiness said that the second one was more powerful, but the first one was more difficult to do. I found that very interesting.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, I kind of, His Holiness also said the sevenfold cause and effect method. Yeah, he said it's a little more difficult because it requires more background understanding. Because there's this whole logic about all sentient beings have been my mother, right? I mean, that's commonly said to be one of the most difficult realizations to generate of all the realizations in the Lam Rim. The realization of guru devotion, that your guru is a Buddha, and the realization that all sentient beings have been your mother, are said to be two of the most difficult realizations in the Lam Rim to generate. So His Holiness was saying, yeah, it requires a lot of background logic and kind of understanding to use that method for generating bodhicitta. Whereas the method of exchanging self and others is just much more direct and common sense, seeing that, yeah, just like I want happiness and don't want suffering, other people are the same, like we're the same. That's not so difficult. But yeah, it's interesting because typically, I mean, traditionally it's taught that of the two methods of generating bodhicitta, the sevenfold cause and effect method is more suitable for those of duller faculties, right? So those with less intelligence, they're supposed to be, it's easier for them to use the sevenfold cause and effect method. Whereas for those of sharper intelligence, it's more powerful for them to use the method of exchanging self and others. So there's a bit of an apparent contradiction now. Yeah, which I haven't really thought about much. So I'm not sure how to talk it away. But anyway, it's good food for thought. So we just leave it at that. So then the second question was something like, the basis, the nature of the mind is clear light. The most subtle level of the mind, the basis for all consciousness is, all of our consciousness, the basis for all of our different levels or different types of awareness is this most subtle mental consciousness that flows in an unbroken stream from life to life, right? So in terms of Tantra, it's like the, what do you say? Innately arising, spontaneous clear light mind, something like that. Innate, spontaneous, clear light mind. It's the most subtle level of mind. But this person was asking, what is the root of, and then samsara. The root of samsara is ignorance, right? Which is a kind of mind. So I thought this was a very good question. I like this question a lot. So then, what is the root of ignorance? He was saying, what's the root of ignorance? And His Holiness took a long time answering this question. So my takeaway is His Holiness was quite impressed with that question too. So from my notes, well, the final basis of imputation for the person is the most subtle level of mind. So then His Holiness talked about, if you think about the 8 stages of dissolution, so there's a great book by His Holiness called Advice for Dying and Living a Better Life. But it's been renamed and published under a different title, which I don't remember. But yeah. So I think it's just like Advice for Living a Better Life or something like that. Took out the dying part. Anyway, there's a great book by His Holiness where he talks about these 8 levels of dissolution at the time of death in detail. So first, the 4 elements, the gross elements of the body absorb. And then there's called the 3 appearances. So the what is it? The white appearance, the red appearance, and then the black appearance of near attainment. Oh, now Karlampa. Oh yeah. Sorry. There's the white appearance, the red. Chepa Marlampa. Yeah, I forget the terms in English. Anyway, there's these 3 kind of appearances that they're dissolution of more and more subtle states of mind, right? So then finally, there's the clear light mind of death. This is the most subtle level of our mind. It becomes manifest in our mind stream, and that's the basis. And then from there, so when we're dying, right? So now we have gross consciousness. As we die, first our sense consciousness absorb, just like when we're going to sleep. Sense consciousness absorb. And then just like when we're sleeping, we give rise to dreams. So it's a more subtle level of consciousness. So then that absorbs. It means it ceases to function, ceases to become functional. And then this most subtle level of the clear light mind of death, and this innate, spontaneous clear light mind, that becomes manifest in the mind stream. So that's the most subtle level of mind, which has existed, from beginningless, has no beginning, and has no end. So then when we take rebirth, we go in a reverse process. So with that subtle mind as the basis, then through the force of karma and grasping, then that mind is thrown into a next rebirth. And then these more gross levels of consciousness again become manifest, or they start to function. So we go in the reverse order with the black appearance, or the black near attainment, red increase. Oh, there it is. Black near attainment, red increase, white appearance, and then the sense consciousness develop. So you can see, think of that clear light mind of death is like the basis. And then samsara, remember our samsara is created by our own mind. So samsara exists on the basis of that. So then the question, well, what about ignorance? So ignorance, I would need to check this with one of my teachers actually. I think His Holiness was saying that fundamental ignorance, well, definitely it's the fundamental ignorance, which is the root of samsara. It's never one nature with that clear light mind, right? I think His Holiness was saying it's a grosser level of consciousness that kind of rides on the clear light mind, like the other kind of grosser levels of consciousness. But it's definitely, it's never one nature with that clear light mind, because if it was, then we could never abandon it, right? But there's a bit of a question about whether that clear light, that most subtle level of clear light mind, whether that actually is, you know, whether it actually can grasp at inherent existence or not, right? One of my teachers, one time I asked him and he said, yes, it can. It can be a form of, it can kind of take the form of ignorance, you grasp at inherent existence. But I'm not sure if that's really the case or not. So that's kind of an open question. We should investigate more. But His Holiness was just emphasizing the point that it is possible to abandon most subtle levels of ignorance, because they are never in the nature of that clear light mind. And how do we ultimately abandon the root of samsara is that we need to access that most subtle level of nature of mind, and then generate that in the aspect of the wisdom realizing emptiness and use that. So that's the whole point of Tantra, basically, is to meditate on these dissolutions at the time of death, practice doing that, and then actually be able to do that and actually access that most subtle level of clear light mind of death and use that mind to meditate. So you can do, you know, dream yoga, all the different kinds of yogas in Tantra, that they all are for the purpose of accessing that subtle level of mind. So this answer to this question very much relates to the next question. So the next question was, remember anyone? Third question. I'll give you a hint. There was this couple, this handsome couple in St. Petersburg, I think. Man and woman sitting together. And the man, he looks like very easygoing, kind of happy-go-lucky guy. And his partner, I don't know if this is his wife or his partner, is just kind of stern, very short hair, kind of sitting there. So what was his question? You remember? Come on, Kelsey, I see you there. Tenzin Peldron's there. Archana's there. Come on, some of you must remember this question. Are you guys watching? Felipe, you remember?
I remember, Venerable. Was it
You
the one
do?
about ultimate bodhicitta, Mahamudra, and Dzogchen?
Exactly. Great. Yeah. Are they the same? What's the difference between ultimate bodhicitta and Mahamudra and Dzogchen? Are they the same, or are they something different?
Yeah, and I would please request you to elaborate on that one, Venerable, because for me at that moment I was very interested in the answer His Holiness gave. I think he started by saying they're different, but I couldn't catch why, because the connection here also dropped a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll do my best. Well, I mean, first of all, ultimate bodhicitta ultimate bodhicitta just means the mind directly realizing emptiness, right? Basically, that's ultimate bodhicitta. And probably you could qualify that conjoined with conventional bodhicitta, right? So in a bodhisattva's continuum, when they generate a mind directly realizing emptiness, or in a Buddha's mind, you know, their wisdom directly realizing emptiness, that's ultimate bodhicitta, right? But then within ultimate bodhicitta, you can kind of think more about, so this, as it relates to Tantra, you can think more about the, well, so the best kind of ultimate bodhicitta would be the, you know, spontaneously arising clear light mind, directly, subtle level of mind, directly realizing emptiness. So this is called the clear light, right? The clear light mind. But then when you talk about the clear light or ultimate bodhicitta, you can talk about the object which is realized, which is emptiness, or the subjective aspect, the mind which realizes, right? So in the sutra presentation of ultimate bodhicitta, it's just a mental consciousness directly realizing emptiness, or non-conceptually realizing emptiness. So the main emphasis is on the object, emptiness, right? And so in the different schools, the Great Exposition School, the Sutra School, Mind Only School, and then the, what is it, Autonomous Middle Way School, the Consequentialist Middle Way School, there's different descriptions of coarse and subtle kinds of emptiness, right? So of course, we want to realize the most subtle, which is described by the Consequentialist Middle Way School. But there's different descriptions of coarse and subtle kinds of emptiness, but there's no real description of coarse and subtle minds realizing emptiness, right? Okay, there's conceptual mind realizing emptiness, non-conceptual mind realizing emptiness, but there's no description of these coarse and more subtle levels of consciousness that we can access. So that's a unique feature of Tantra, right? That you can use these different methods to realize this most subtle level of mind and to ultimately abandon the root of samsara and all the imprints of ignorance, which is the root of samsara. You have to access this most subtle level of mind. So he's saying, so that's the whole point of Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And basically, His Holiness is saying they're the same. Their method is the same. They use, slightly different, but basically the same methods. And the whole purpose is to access this most subtle level of mind, this spontaneously arising clear light mind, cause that to become manifest in the mind stream, and then become familiar with that and gain the ability to use that level of awareness to meditate on emptiness, and do that again and again and again, and thereby gradually abandon all the most subtle obscurations. And then, so here His Holiness gave a quote. So I'll skip to my share screen again and see if I can find it. Oh yeah, here, His Holiness just threw out this verse from the Lalita Vistara Sutra. So this is supposedly the first verse that the Buddha spoke after achieving enlightenment. This ambrosial dharma I've attained is profound, peaceful, free of elaborations, luminous and unconditioned. If I explain it, no one will understand. I think I shall remain silent in the forest. Right? So His Holiness usually explains that in this second line, so this ambrosial dharma I've attained. So the dharma, this is the ultimate truth. He talks about both the objective, the thing realized, and the subjective, the mind realizing it. Right? So that's what we're talking about here in relation to Mahamudra and Dzogchen. So profound, peaceful, free of elaborations. Those first three adjectives refer to the object, emptiness, right? Emptiness is profound because it's the ultimate, it's the final, the most subtle, the most fundamental nature of all phenomena. It's peaceful because, realizing emptiness brings about elimination of ignorance and all suffering. And then it's free of elaborations because, when you realize emptiness, it purifies the mind of all wrong views, grasping at, inherent existence, grasping at a permanent self, grasping at, independent things as being independent, things not depending upon parts, causes and conditions, and so forth. So these first three adjectives, profound, peaceful, free of elaborations, is talking about emptiness, the objective, you could say the objective ultimate bodhicitta, or the object of clear light, the object of clear light. And then luminous and unconditioned is talking about the subjective clear light, or the subjective ultimate bodhicitta. So that's talking about this most fundamental nature of mind, is that it's luminous or radiant or clear. The definition of mind is that which is clear and knowing. So this word, when in the definition of mind, we say that which is clear and knowing. This word clear can also be translated as luminous. It's the same word in Tibetan. And unconditioned, meaning that from beginningless time, its nature is to be free from obscurations and free from any contamination, free from ignorance, basically. Yeah. So that's what the Buddha, when he became enlightened, he realized both this objective and subjective clear light, or generated a union of this objective subjective clear light. So he was saying, His Holiness was saying then that, so this pure, the Buddha nature, right? the ability, the potential of our mind to achieve full enlightenment or to transform into the mind of a Buddha is taught briefly in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, but taught extensively in tantras. So this is another reason that His Holiness often gives that the tantras, as taught by the Buddha, are actually the word of the Buddha, that they are an authentic teaching of the Buddha or authentic Buddha's teaching, and not just something made up by people later on, because they are natural extension of what was mentioned in brief in the third turning of the Dhamma. So whereas, and then His Holiness often makes the distinction, whereas the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, so the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, it focuses on emptiness, objective emptiness, right? The object that we need to realize, emptiness of inherent existence. So that's the objective clear light. But then the third turning of the wheel of Dharma builds on that. So remember, historically, in terms of time, the third turn of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught after the second turn of the wheel of Dharma, right? So the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras in the second turn of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught on Vulture's Peak 1 year after he was enlightened. The third turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught in Vaishali 12 years after he was enlightened, right? So the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma builds on the second turning of the wheel of Dharma because, again, in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught the ultimate nature of reality, emptiness of inherent existence. And then in the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma, the Buddha taught, and the mind we need to use, the best mind to use to realize that is our, basically our clear light mind. Or this, the Deijin Sheipei Ningpo, the essential, I don't know how to translate it. It's like ours, that we have, basically that we have this kind of Buddha nature, that we have this subtle level of mind, which actually has the potential to transform into the mind of a Buddha. And we need to use that mind to realize emptiness, right? So this subjective clear light that was taught in the third turning of the Dharma. So both Mahamudra and Dzogchen, they both, use the language of and talk about the ultimate bodhicitta. And the importance of this subtlety of the mind. And then His Holiness gave a quotation by Jetsun Milarepa, which I didn't have time to find for you all. I'm sure it's in, I don't know if you know, but in like in the Gelugpa school, the most famous commentary on Mahamudra is by Panchen Losang Chogi Gyaltsen, who's also the author of Lama Chopa. And that text by Panchen Losang Chogi Gyaltsen is full of quotations from Milarepa and Marpa. So it's easy to see that the Gelugpa presentation of Mahamudra is very clearly based on the lineage of Marpa and Milarepa, the Kagyu Mahamudra. So His Holiness was saying in our studies, it's important to first study the objective clear light or emptiness and get a good understanding of emptiness as presented by the middle way consequentialist school. And then once we have that, then on the basis of that, then study Tantra and how Tantra describes accessing, these different levels of subtlety of consciousness and how to use those. So then study and practice Tantra and use that to access more subtle levels of mind and use those to meditate on emptiness. Okay, so that's a very nice presentation. That's all that question. So then, question number 4. How did the Buddha explain the mind? And so this is the scientist, remember this Russian scientist in Petersburg. He said, how did the Buddha explain the mind in detail before there were machines? Ooh. By looking at the mind, with the mind. His Holiness, the first thing His Holiness said was, the mind is not the brain, right? Hello. And then His Holiness talked about how clinical death, as evidence for that clinical death, when the heart stops beating, we stop breathing, there's no more blood flow to the brain, there's still the phenomena of tukta. There's still this phenomena of people's bodies not deteriorating, that their bodies remaining fresh, and having warmth and temperature. And I mean, even His Holiness didn't say, but you can even add, and there being some signals in the brain, some activity in the brain. And that this is something that is more and more being studied by different scientists, including some Russian scientific teams, especially among the monks in South India, and even within, His Holiness mentioned, since the Tibetans have been in exile in India, the longest someone who stayed in this state is 21 days. It was about 10 years ago. But just recently in Taiwan, one Geshe stayed in this state, this Tuktam state, for I think almost 20 days as well. So His Holiness is saying, if the mind depends upon brain activity, then this shouldn't be possible. So the scientific world has they have no way to explain how it's possible when someone's brain is not functioning, that their body can be fresh and there can be activity in the brain. I mean, when there's no blood flow to the brain, the heart's not functioning. So this is something that needs to be investigated further. And then, I don't know, do any of you have questions yet? Come on, someone has to have a good question. What are you guys doing? I wonder if these people with the names on their little Zoom screen boxes are really there. We just turn Zoom on and then like go for a walk or something. I don't know. Dilshad is there. Kunben is there. I can see you guys, but the rest of you don't see. Anyway, I know you have your videos off so that we have better internet connection. We do need that because my connection is still says limited. Okay, so question number 5. Oh, there was a young Russian woman, laywoman. She asked about impermanence, momentary change. And how short is the shortest moment of time? Is it 1 second or is it something shorter? In short, His Holiness said, no, it's shorter than that. Usually we say in a youthful person's finger snap, you divide that into 64 parts. That's the shortest moment of time, according to, I think, the Great Exposition School. According to the Kala Chakra Tantra, you take the same, short, a youthful, I'm not exactly a youthful person, so think maybe a little shorter finger snap than that. Then you divide into, I think, like 154 parts or something like that. So anyway, you can see it's much shorter than a second. It's a bit shorter than a second. And His Holiness was saying, because a second, 1 second, well, here His Holiness was saying, it's important to recognize when we talk about impermanence, there's coarse impermanence and subtle impermanence, right? So coarse impermanence is the kind of impermanence and change we can see. So like, as you're looking at me talk on the screen, you can see I'm moving, right? My hand is moving. So thereby I'm changing, right? Or if we look at the clouds in the daytime, or if we watch, I don't know, we watch the water boil, that change, the momentary, we look at our own mind, we can see our mind is continually changing. So that's all coarse impermanence, right? Whatever kind of change or impermanence that we can see as an ordinary person, we can directly experience, is coarse impermanence. So when we talk about subtle impermanence, we're talking about, the fact that there is change on an even shorter scale, shorter time scale than that, right? So even if you divide in terms of time scale, take a youthful person's finger snap, which is already like just half a second or a quarter of a second, right? And then you divide that into 64 parts. Each of those moments, things are changing, and it's not that things are static within the duration of one of those shortest moments. That's not the case. Those moments are just, I'm not sure, why do we even talk about shortest moments in time? It's a little bit silly. But continually, there's no moment when things are not changing, in short, right? So we can mentally divide up moments into smaller and smaller parts, and there's no part, there's no moment, there's no time at which impermanent things are not changing. They're continually changing, right? Without any cease. And then part of her question was also about mental factors and main mind. Are they produced at the same time? And I didn't understand if there's a connection between the two parts of the question. That I didn't really get. But His Holiness in short said, main mind, like our eye consciousness seeing something. The main mind is the eye consciousness which merely observes the object. And then the mental factors are like the other functions of the main mind in relation to. So the being directed towards the object, remaining on the object, having a sense of pleasure or displeasure with relation to the object, having a sense of desire for or aversion to the object. Those are all mental factors. So those different functions accompany the main mind, which merely observes the entity of the object. So His Holiness was just saying, mental factors and main minds, they go together. I don't remember if he gave an example, but a mental factors, they always accompany a main mind. And a main mind is always accompanied by a set of mental factors. But they're produced, any one instance of a main mind and its mental factors are produced at the same time, they abide for the same time, and they cease to exist at the same time. Yeah. And then finally, there was the last question about the Bodhisattva's way of life. And something, it was that Mongolian woman. She had a very nice kind of blue outfit, and she was holding a blue kata. If any of you have a chance to ask His Holiness a question on Zoom in the future, it's really good to have a kata in your hands. Very, very good. Then because you don't want to be empty-handed, in front of the Lama. Right? So it's good to have a little, make a gift at the same time as you ask a question. I think she said something about I think my internet connection cut out here, but I think she said something like, we say the world is in the nature of suffering. So how do you not get depressed? Right? This is a good question. In the course of answering the question, His Holiness said, yeah, it's true. But like Shantideva says, if there's something you can do about it, then why be upset? Do something about your problems. If there's nothing you can do about them, then also there's, why be upset? Just accept it stoically, basically. So, His Holiness was saying, we have to accept that, we're in the nature of suffering, samsara is in the nature of suffering, so things are not going to go well sometimes. But so what? We focus on the aspects we can do something about, to be a better person, to improve the lives of others, to improve the world. We focus on that, and because we do have opportunities to definitely improve ourselves, to improve the world. So we should focus on what we can do, and be happy about that. And the things we can't do anything about, just what to do. Just have to let it go. Okay, so that's the end of my part here.
There's one question, Venerable. I sent it to your chat.
In the chat, I saw something happen in the chat there. Could you please explain a bit that? Could you please explain a bit that why the sound has its own continuum, as said in Abhidharma Kosha? Thanks. Maybe not related to this session. No, it's a good question. It's very well related to this session. Why does sound have no continuum? Oh man, that's a tough question, actually. I have a good excuse for not giving a very good answer to it, because I haven't studied the Abhidharma Kosha yet. That's what I'll be studying for the next 2 years. So in 2 years from now, if I can't answer it well, then you can ask me. But why doesn't sound have a continuum? Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think it's like this. Well, definitely, there are different ways to talk about it. Definitely, you think about the last moment of sound. So, I'm trying to think of a good sound I can make for you guys here. I wish I had a little bell here, but I'll try my mug. There's my mug. Listen carefully. Okay, so the sound arose, it abided, and then there's a last moment of the ring, right? The last moment of the sound, it doesn't produce a successive moment of sound, right? So most sounds we hear, the sound arises, it exists for a while, and then it stops, right? So definitely the last moment of the sound it doesn't produce a subsequent continuum of sound, right? So the idea actually is probably that, that sound doesn't have a continuum, is that actually, when I make this sound, what's producing the sound actually is the vibration of the mug. Just like when we speak, it's the vibration of our vocal cords that produces the sound. It's not that the sound produces the next moment of sound, right? So for as long, that's why does the sound only last a short time? Because for as long as the mug is vibrating, it produces the waves in the air, which when they strike our ear, we I don't know, what are the stuff in our ear, the eardrum, there we go, the eardrum. When the waves in the air strike our eardrum, and then that sends a signal to our nerves, and we experience the phenomenon of sound. So where is the sound actually? Is it on the mug? Is it in the space between? Is it the vibration in the ear? Or is it the signal that goes through the the neural corrections in the brain, which we experience as sound? It's the same with color. Where does the color actually exist? Because the sound, a color, those things are actually interdependently arising phenomena that they come into existence in dependence upon the meeting of, like, the vibration in the air with my eardrum and the nerves in my brain, right? Sound doesn't exist independently from our ears and from our brains, right? So, I just saved it. So, oh, an insect got in my water. So, so for as long as the mug is vibrating, that vibration produces sound, basically, right? So it's not that, one moment of sound produces a second moment of sound, produces a third moment of sound. It's that as long as something is vibrating, that vibration produces sound. That vibration is not sound, right? The vibration of the mug is not sound. The vibration of the mug produces sound. The vibration of my vocal cords is not sound. That vibration produces waves in the air, and then those waves in the air produce sound. So it's not that, I think that's kind of the reasoning in Abhidharma Kosha, that it's not the sound itself which produces a subsequent moment of sound, but actually there has to be something else, some vibration which produces the sound. I think it's something like that. But if you have a follow-up question or another question, or if you have an opportunity to ask another, someone else, like Geshe Dorje Damdul, or I don't know, some other Geshe or something, it's a good question to ask. Okay. Hello, hello, all you YouTube participants out there and Facebook participants. Do you have any questions?
There's no questions from Facebook.
I think not. Yes, Felipe, I know. Yeah. Well, let's meditate just a little bit, and then we'll dedicate. We just have less than 5 minutes left. So yeah, take a few deep breaths and get comfortable in your kind of meditation posture. Since I've been talking so much, I'm not going to tell you what to meditate on. So just try to, take a few moments and think of what we've been discussing the last 2 hours almost, and just reflect on something, for a few moments, a few minutes, and then we'll dedicate. Okay, so let's conclude there. So think of all the merit we've created together, reviewing His Holiness teachings this morning and reviewing some verses that His Holiness quoted and some of the text. This is a great text by Nagarjuna. So think how excellent it is. All the merit created by us, all the merit created by His Holiness, all the merit created by Nagarjuna, and all the other participants, all the other students of His Holiness, and all sentient beings, and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in general. So this great oceans of merit, infinite skies of merit, positive energy. Then we dedicate that the Buddhist teachings may flourish, that we and all sentient beings develop the two bodhicittas, ultimate and conventional bodhicitta, within our mind streams as quickly as possible. And that in order to be of the greatest possible benefit to all sentient beings, we could quickly achieve the state of full enlightenment. And for this purpose, may we, in this and all of our lives, practice perfect devotion to our gurus. And especially may His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all of our other gurus have long and stable lives. May all of our actions only please their holy minds. And may their intentions and aspirations for us quickly be fulfilled. And any other prayers you have, may they also be answered. And then, of course, may this global pandemic of COVID-19 and all the other suffering and problems it entails quickly be, as well as climate destruction, global warming, and all other conflict sources of man-made suffering in the world. May those quickly be brought to an end, and all beings abide in harmony with one another and with the natural environment. Okay. Thank you all very much, and hope to see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.